I swore I'd find him, no matter what. A child's cry, thin and reedy, sliced through the air. Alina flinched. Another cry, closer this time. He's here, she whispered, clutching the worn photograph. My brother. She pushed open the orphanage gate. Looking for someone? A gruff voice. Alina turned. A woman, face etched with lines of hardship, sat on a crumbling stoop. My brother, Alina said, holding out a photo. He'd be about 7 now. The woman squinted. Don't know any 7-year-olds? Director keeps the little ones out of sight, unless... Her voice dropped to a whisper. Unless they're being shown off. Alina felt a chill. Shown off. To prospective parents, the woman said, spitting on the ground. Rich ones, mostly. From other countries. She looked at Alina. You got money. Alina shook her head. Just this. She tapped the photo. Then you got nothing, the woman said, turning away. Best leave. This place ain't for the likes of you. But Alina stayed. She watched children playing in the dusty yard, their laughter brittle, their eyes wary. A small boy huddled alone in a corner, clutching a ragged doll. He looked up, his gaze meeting Alina's. For a moment, she saw her brother in his haunted eyes. Where do they keep the records? Alina asked the woman. The woman sighed. Inside. But the director won't show them to you. Not without... She gestured with her hand, rubbing her thumb and forefinger together. Alina's stomach clenched. She had nothing to offer. Later, Alina huddled in a doorway, gnawing on a stale crust of bread. Hunger gnawed at her, sharper than the guilt that always lingered. She watched a market stall piled high with apples, her mouth watering. A vendor turned his back. Alina's hand darted out, snatching an apple. She ran. Thief! Vendor's shout echoed through the streets. Alina's heart pounded. She ducked into a narrow alley, the apple clutched tight in her hand. A man blocked her path. He was well dressed, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Nice apple, he said, his eyes glinting. Stolen, I presume? Alina swallowed. I was hungry. The man chuckled. Hungry? We can fix that. And maybe make some money while we're at it. He held out a hand. I'm Dimitri. Alina hesitated, then shook his hand. Alina, Dimitri repeated. A good name for a girl with quick hands. Tell me, Alina, are you interested in making a deal? Dimitri led Alina deeper into the alley, to a hidden door. Inside, men huddled around tables, their voices low, their faces obscured by shadows. This, Dimitri said, is where the real business happened. He leaned closer. I can offer you work, Alina. Work that pays well, but it's not for the faint of heart. Alina nodded, her mind racing. Money, it was what she needed. What she needed to get her brother back. I can steal, she said. Anything. Dimitri smiled. Good, very good. Alina completed her first task for Dimitri, stealing a jeweled brooch from a wealthy woman's purse. The thrill of success was quickly replaced by guilt. She returned to the alley, her hands trembling. Dimitri examined the brooch, his eyes approving. Excellent work, Alina, he said, handing her a wad of bills. You've got talent. Alina clutched the money, her heart pounding. It was more than she had ever held in her hands. Enough, perhaps, to start a new life. But her life without her brother was no life at all. I need information, she said to Dimitri. About the orphanage, about the director. Dimitri raised an eyebrow. Curious. Why the sudden interest in orphans? Alina hesitated. My brother. He's there. Dimitri studied her for a moment, then shrugged. Information comes at a price, Alina, but I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. Dimitri provided Alina with the name of a man who worked at the orphanage. He's not fond of the director, Dimitri said. Might be willing to talk. For a price, of course. Alina found the man, a gaunt figure huddled in a doorway, his clothes ragged. He was reluctant to speak at first, his eyes darting nervously around. But Alina's desperation and the money she offered persuaded him. The director, the man whispered. He's a monster. He hurts the children. Alina's blood ran cold. Hurts them? How? Beats them, the man said, his voice trembling. Starves them, sells them off to whoever pays the most. Alina's hand instinctively went to the photograph in her pocket. Her brother. She had to get him out. Alina continued working for Dmitri, completing increasingly dangerous tasks. She stole jewelry, forged documents, even delivered packages she suspected contained illegal goods. Each success brought her closer to her goal, but the weight of her actions pressed down on her, heavy as a stone. One evening, as she delivered a package to a shadowy figure in a deserted warehouse, she saw a familiar face. The elderly woman from the refugee camp? She was arguing with Dmitri, her voice shrill with anger. "Leave her alone," the woman shouted. "She's just a child." Dmitri laughed. "A child with a talent for thievery, a valuable asset." Alina watched, frozen in place, as Dmitri shoved the elderly woman to the ground. Rage surged through her. She lunged at Dmitri, but he caught her arm, twisting it behind her back. "You ungrateful little," he snarled. The elderly woman scrambled to her feet, grabbing a loose brick from the rubble. She swung it at Dmitri's head. He stumbled back, releasing Alina. "Run!" the woman shouted. Alina hesitated, her mind racing. She could run. She could disappear back into the shadows. But she couldn't leave the elderly woman to face Dmitri's wrath. Alina grabbed the package she had been delivering, ripping it open. Inside, she found a stack of documents, official-looking papers stamped with the orphanage's seal. She grabbed the papers, shoving them into her bag. "Come on!" she shouted to the woman, pulling her towards the warehouse door. They ran. Alina counted the money she earned, her hands trembling. It was enough. Enough to bribe the director. Enough to buy her brother's freedom. But as she looked at the worn photograph, a wave of nausea washed over her. This money, stained with deceit and violence, could it truly buy her brother's happiness? Could it erase her guilt? Alina sought out the elderly woman, her heart heavy with shame. She confessed everything, her voice choked with tears. The woman listened patiently, her gaze unwavering. "You made mistakes, child," she said finally. "But you can still choose to do the right thing." She handed Alina a crumpled newspaper article. "This journalist," she said, pointing to a name. "He's been investigating the orphanage. He might be able to help." Alina looked at the article, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way. A way that didn't involve lies and deceit. A way that could lead to true redemption. Igor led them through a labyrinth of dimly lit alleyways, the stench of refuse and decay thick in the air. They reached a crumbling tenement building, its windows dark and lifeless. Igor fumbled with a rusty key, the lock protesting with a groan. "In here," Igor whispered, pushing open the door to a cramped, airless room. He lit a flickering oil lamp, casting long shadows on appealing walls. The room was sparsely furnished, a single cot pushed against one wall, a rickety table piled with papers and books. "The documents," Anton said, his voice tense. Igor shuffled through the papers, his hands shaking. "Here," he said, handing Anton a thick folder. Anton opened the folder, his eyes scanning the contents. His expression hardened. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Proof of the director's crimes." Alina peered over Anton's shoulder, her heart pounding. The documents were a jumble of names, dates, and figures, but she recognized the orphanage's official seal on several of the papers. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means the director has been selling the children," Anton said, his voice grim. "Falsifying adoption records, sending them to wealthy families abroad." Alina gasped. "But that's monstrous." "It's also illegal," Anton said. "And we have the proof to expose him." "What do we do now?" Alina asked. "We go to the police," Anton said, closing the folder. "And we bring the director down." They left Igor's apartment and hurried through the darkened streets, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones. Alina's mind raced. She thought of Pyotr, trapped in that dreadful orphanage, his fate uncertain. She had to get him out. They reached the police station, an imposing stone building that loomed over the surrounding streets. Anton marched inside, Alina trailing behind him. They approached the desk sergeant, a burly man with a weary expression. "We need to see Inspector Petrov," Anton said, his voice firm. The sergeant looked up, his eyebrows raised. "Inspector Petrov is a busy man. What's this about?" "It's about the orphanage," Anton said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The director is selling the children." The sergeant's eyes widened. He glanced at Alina, then back at Anton. "Wait here," he said, disappearing through a door behind the desk. They waited in silence, the only sound, the ticking of a clock on the wall. Alina's anxiety grew with each passing minute. She had to know if Piotr was safe. The sergeant returned, followed by a tall, imposing man with a stern expression. "I am Inspector Petrov," the man said, his voice deep and resonant. "I understand you have information about the orphanage." Anton stepped forward. "We have proof that the director is selling the children," he said, handing Petrov the folder. Petrov took the folder and began to read, his expression darkening with each page. When he finished, he looked up at Anton and Alina. "This is serious," he said, his voice grave. "If these allegations are true, the director will face serious charges." "They are true," Alina said, her voice trembling. "I've seen it with my own eyes." Petrov studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you," he said. "We will launch an investigation immediately." "Thank you," Anton said. "We'll do whatever we can to help." "I appreciate that," Petrov said. "But for now, I need you to stay out of this. This is a police matter now." Alina and Anton left the police station, their hearts heavy with anticipation. They had done what they could. Now, they had to wait and hope that justice would be served. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation continued. Alina stayed with the elderly woman, her anxiety growing with each passing day. She longed to see Piotr, to know that he was safe. Finally, news arrived. The police had raided the orphanage and arrested the director. The children were being taken into protective custody. Alina rushed to the orphanage, her heart pounding with hope and fear. She found Piotr in a courtyard, surrounded by other children, his eyes wide with confusion. "Piotr!" she cried, running towards him. Piotr saw her and his face lit up with recognition. He ran into her arms, clinging to her tightly. "Alina," he sobbed. "You came back." Alina held him close, her own tears flowing freely. "I promised I would, Piotr. I promised." They left the orphanage together, hand in hand, walking towards a brighter future. The worn photograph, a reminder of their shared past, remained tucked safely in Alina's pocket, a testament to the enduring power of love and the promise of redemption. The trial of the orphanage director was swift and decisive. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his reign of terror finally brought to an end. Alina and Piotr were placed in the care of a kind and compassionate couple who lived in a small village outside the city. They welcomed the siblings into their home, providing them with the love and stability they had long craved. Alina thrived in her new environment. She excelled in school, made new friends, and began to heal from the trauma of her past. Piotr, too, blossomed under the care of their foster parents. He became a happy and well-adjusted child, the shadows of the orphanage fading from his eyes. Years passed, and Alina and Piotr grew into adulthood. They never forgot the horrors they had endured, but they refused to let their past define them. They lived their lives with courage and compassion, always remembering the lessons they had learned during their time on the streets. One day, Alina returned to the city where she had once lived as a thief and a fugitive. She walked through familiar streets, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She visited the alleyway where she had first met Dmitri, the place where her life had taken such a dramatic turn. She paused in front of the orphanage, its windows now boarded up, its gates chained shut. The building stood as a silent reminder of the darkness that had once resided within its walls. But Alina also saw a glimmer of hope in the dilapidated structure. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of places, light can prevail. Alina continued her walk, her footsteps lighter now, her heart filled with a sense of peace. She had come a long way from the frightened and desperate girl who had once roamed these streets. She had found her brother, exposed the truth, and built a new life for herself and Piotr. As she walked towards the setting sun, Alina smiled. She had found redemption, not through violence or revenge, but through love, courage, and the unwavering belief in the power of hope.